I'm Nupur Chawla, teaching English literature at Maitri College, Delhi University. And in this, this lecture is part of the ongoing series on the English essay. This is the second part of the lecture. In the first part, we discussed about William Cowper, the literary figure of middle and late 18th century. We discussed what are his primary modes of expression, what are some of the concerns that we witnessed in his writings, and most importantly, how did he get to write the essay. So, one of the points that we had mentioned was that he was primarily not an essayist, but primarily a poet, right? But yet at the same time, if we have to understand the English essay, we cannot ignore his contribution to the form as well, because as we were discussing in the last lecture, that he brought in the idea of the natural in the essay form in the late 18th century, right? While of course retaining all other characteristic features of this form of expression, such as social critique, satire, humor, wit, observation of society of the time, and all of that, right? And of course, commentary on the issues and the people of the time, and most importantly, even providing a source of entertainment for people. Given all of this as a backdrop, now let us straight away get into discussing certain excerpts from two essays by William Cowper that were published in this periodical, The Connoisseur, that came out right in the middle of the 18th century, which is 1754. And as we were discussing in the last lecture as well, that it's often talked about in the light of The Spectator as well, right? So now this essay is number 111, and it's called On Mothers' Sons, right? Now in this essay, what does Cowper do? He and who is his center of attention? It's the men who are who, according to Cowper, are very close to their mothers, who are not quote unquote manly in the conventional sense of the word. And so if you read this essay, it's a lot of fun reading it, because on the face of it, he is making fun of men and their closeness with their mothers even after they grow up, and that's why he's called it On Mothers' Sons. But of course, if we go beyond just the wit and just the fun that this essay brings, there are some important points that Cowper seems to be raising, right? So let us look at a few quotes from here and discuss and also get a flavor of what he was doing as an essayist. So, right in the beginning, he discusses about these men who are not very quintessentially masculine, right? This essay is written in a form that it is addressed to Mr. Town. Again, if you remember, the central persona of the essay. So it says, the beginning of the essay says, and I'll quote, "You have already given us several instances of those ambiguous creatures among the men who are both male and female. Permit me to add to them an account of those ladylike gentlemen whom we may distinguish by the title of their mother's own sons," unquote. So you see here, he's being rather sharp when he says those ambiguous creatures among the men. Ambiguous, why? Because according to him, their closeness to their mothers in such an advanced age is something which is not very commonly seen and is unnatural. So, he is introducing the subject of this particular essay. He says that we may distinguish them by the title, their mother's own sons, right. So, just if you look at this opening sentence itself, there is wit, where look at the word usage, those ambiguous creatures among men, right. There's this word play, there's very clear word play being done by William Cowper, and he's right at the outset, the tone is also established, which is what? He's having fun at the cost of a certain section of society, right. And what is the reason for poking fun at this certain section of society? Once again, to comment, to bring to the center bigger issues, bigger concerns, and bigger observations, right. Now, let's look at the second quote from the essay, and I quote, he says, I am intimately acquainted with one of these overgrown babies who is indeed too big to be dandled in lap or fed with a pap spoon, though he is no more weaned from his mother than if he had not yet quitted the nursery, unquote. Now, you see, we say that the voice in the essay says, I am intimately acquainted with one of these overgrown babies. Now, a second feature of the essay, that it appears that they are talking about an individual, right, and which also is the case, because he very clearly makes a claim that in this essay I am talking about one such man who I am intimately acquainted with. But well, is the focus on that individual? No. The focus instead is on the larger group of people that the particular individual then belongs to, or his or we can say, if we can use the word, he's a prototype of, right. So, while the at the center is the individual, but through him the entire section of people are being commented upon, right. He calls them these overgrown babies, right. Okay, let's go to the third quote. He says, and I quote, the good young gentleman, for his part, is neither undutiful nor ungrateful. She is the only woman that he does not look on with indifference, and she is his tutoress, his physician, and his nurse, unquote. Now, you see, there's a slight gap in the quote here. There's supposed to be an ellipsis in between, because he first in this quote begins by discussing that a good gentleman, such a man who he calls an overgrown baby, is neither undutiful nor ungrateful. Means that he is a man who will fulfill his duties, he is grateful where he is needed to be, but at the same time there are certain special favors that are reserved only for his mother. So, that is why the writer says she. Now, again, so there was a slight miss over there, but just to fill in that gap there, she over here in the quote refers to his mother. So, she is the only woman that he does not look on with indifference, and she is his tutoress, his physician, and his nurse, unquote. So, what does this tell us? That such a man's mother is the only woman who receives his attention. All other women, he treats them with indifference. Now, what does this highlight? Even as on the face of it, the author is talking about a man with a particular personality, but largely he is also commenting on the way women were treated, right. The mother was the only woman who got that attention, while in common it was indifference that was reserved for the usual women. Okay, so the fact that this exception is highlighted goes on to do what? It goes on to tell us that what was the drift of the times, that how men, were known to treat women usually, right? And but these particular men that he talks about, quote unquote, the mother's sons, were more indulgent towards their mothers, right? Next, let's look at this another quote and see what insight that the author shares here. He says, and I quote, "But however familiarly he may behave in his addresses to his mother, and whatever little acts of gallantry may pass between them, no encouragement can prevail on him to treat other women with the same freedom." Unquote. So here the author goes again. The freedom, the encouragement, and the way this man treated his mother, that those same values were not reserved for other women according to him. Once again, even as Cooper is talking about a man who's very close to mother, and through him the larger chunk of men who are of a similar personality. But you see, while discussing this section of people, there's a larger comment being made on the position of women in society as well, right? Now let's look at this third quote. He says, and I quote, "He would rather leave the most celebrated beauty in crossing the street to the mercy of a drayman, though at the same time, should his mother be so distressed, he would not scruple to bear as much of her weight as he could stand under, and to redeem her silk stockings from jeopardy, would even expose his own." Unquote. A third instance that the writer gives of how this man will not be so readily available, so forthcoming in helping a woman in crossing the street, and if she is in a situation, he is not going to be bothered. But if it's his own mother, he would go, he would do anything possible, as he says, to redeem her silk stockings from jeopardy, from being destroyed or from being damaged. He would even expose his own. Means what? That even if it meant trading his own, respect, his own, selfhood in helping the mother out, the man would do it. But if it were for another woman, he would not, right? So this also then gives us a drift of the gender concerns of the time. Likewise, now you see, while that's what the author tells us, that in his observations about such men, we understand a drift of what men were like towards women, right? But then another question comes to mind, that okay, where did the author stand, or what was author's view in when he observed all of this, right? Does he stand by such men? What does he think of them, right? So we get a slight sense of it in this following quote, where he's thinking about this creature or this intimate or this character in connection with other women once again. And let's look at this quote carefully. He says, and I quote, "I am now coming to the most extraordinary part of his character. This pusillanimous creature thinks himself and would be thought a buck. In short," now okay, I'll just continue with the quote. What do we mean by a buck? A buck means, somebody who's very important and somebody, who deserves all the attention and, is an important and a significant individual, right. So, he says that this man who actually is pusillanimous thinks himself to be quite a buck. He thinks high of himself, right. And that, he says, is an extraordinary part of his character. Okay. But he doesn't stop at that. The author says, and I quote again, "In short, a woman of the least spirit within the precincts of St. James would demolish him in a week, should he pretend to keep pace with her in her irregularities. And yet, he is ever dignifying himself with the appellation of a buck." Unquote. What is the author doing here? He says that if a woman were to be in competition with this man in irregularities, or if at all he dared to keep pace with her, he would be demolished, as he says, right. So, the author is trying to expose the hollowness of such a man, while very clearly comparing him to the woman and putting the woman in a better stead as compared to this particular character, right. So, in this part of the essay, so we notice these three things. First, that while talking about a mother's, what he calls as mother's sons, he is essentially making fun of a section of society, right. Second, he is talking about a particular individual, because that's how he introduces the essay, that such a man is known to me intimately. Okay. So, while he is talking about the individual, but the eye is on the society or the social. That's the second important point that we noticed through these quotes. A third thing that we notice, and a question that would have come to your mind, is why should we read such an essay? What are we gaining out of it when somebody is just gossiping about a particular kind of man? Why should we be interested in it? Because we get to know about the society, about the kind of people that existed at the time, but most importantly, through such a witty description of an individual, certain serious concerns are also raised, certain important matters are brought to the fore. And here, in the quotes that we had seen, we see that the question of gender becomes quite prominent, right. We understand, or we get a view into what was general perception of women amongst men, right. And therefore, when he makes those comparisons, that how the man, this quote unquote mother's son, would treat his mother, and quite a contrast to that was how he would treat other women. That was a comment on the society of the time. Okay. And fourth, we said that the essay contributes to some form of entertainment. And if you look at the language closely, if you look at the way it is written, very clearly the writer is trying to have fun, right. And that's also the intent, that the reader should also be entertained while at the same time educated, right. So, these are some of the things that we take away as from the particular essay. Okay. Now, if we come to the second essay in the Connoisseur, it's number 115, and it's called "On Being a Bachelor." All right, another very important, not important, but an interesting title. So, this was the second essay in the periodical The Connoisseur. Now, what is Cooper talking about here? Here, he's talking about, he's creating the character of a bachelor and his experiences in society. Okay, and I would say that these two essays must be read together. Why? Because in this particular essay, the way he represents women and the way women challenge a man is really decisive, and also it is not only a matter of humor, the way that's represented, but of course the author is also making a point, right? So in this essay he's basically talking about how he's treated by women in society, a man who's a bachelor. Okay, so let's take a look at a few excerpts from this particular essay as well, that's called On Being a Bachelor. So he begins the essay by saying, and I quote, "Raillery of every kind, provided it be confined within due bounds, is, in my opinion, an excellent ingredient in conversation. And I am never displeased if I can contribute to the harmless mirth of the company by being myself the subject of it," unquote. So right at the outset, he's talking about raillery. Raillery means good-humored teasing. He says good-humored teasing is actually, and if done within bounds, is, in my opinion, as he says, an excellent ingredient in conversation. Now, once again, establishing what? The method of expression in 18th century. That's what defined how people wrote and discussed. And he says that I am absolutely okay with that. And after that, he comes to this instance wherein he describes how young women treat him when he spends time amongst them in the coffee house, right? So the way these women get together and make fun of him, right, and tease him. So that is the connection with raillery. So first he says that I don't mind raillery at all, and then he goes on to discuss how he was the subject of it. Okay, so let's look at this second instance and the second quote from the essay. He says, and I quote, "These ingenious young ladies have not only found out the sole end and purpose of my being themselves, but have likewise communicated the discovery to all the girls in the neighborhood, so that if they happen at any time to be apprised of my coming, they immediately dispatch half a dozen cards to their faithful allies to beg the favor of their company to drink coffee and help tease Mr. Ironside," unquote. So what is he saying here? That the women have made it their sole purpose, which is what? To comment on my being. What's happening? Which means he is very closely observed and commented on and made fun of by women. In fact, not just women, but he calls them young ladies, right? And so they take pleasure in teasing him, and he's at the center of their jokes, right? Let's look at the second quote. He says, and I quote, "As much a sufferer as I am by the behavior of the women in general, I must not forget to remark that the pertness and the sauciness of an old maid is particularly offensive to me. I cannot help thinking that the virginity of these ancient misses is at least as ridiculous as my own celibacy," unquote. Now once again, he says what? That as much a sufferer as I am by the behavior of the women in general. Now again, noticing what, or highlighting what? That he is at the butt of jokes for women, right? But in the beginning, look how he also contradicts himself. In the beginning, he says, raillery is something that I prefer, even though I am at the center of it as a subject. But here, he very clearly says, I tend to take offense, right? It's particularly offensive to me. So when this persona and his equation with women once again becomes a way for Cooper to reflect on the society, right? While yes, women, in the previous essay we saw, are not really treated very well, but at the same time they won't take things lying down, they will give it back. And we see this giving back in this other essay, which is on a bachelor and how these women come and tease this man. Okay, come to the next quote, and he says, "Believe me, Mr. Town, I am almost afraid to trust you with the publication of this epistle." Epistle means letter. "The ladies whom I last mentioned will be so exasperated on reading it that I must expect no quarter at their hands for the future." Unquote. Once again, quite a lot of fun, right? He says that even as I trust you completely, but if this letter is published where I talk about how they tease me and what I feel during those moments, they will be exasperated on reading it, right? So which means what? That he is very much conscious of the reception that he is going to have amongst women of his writing. So once again establishing the fact that women mattered, right? So you see, these are some of the questions that we must ask, that why did Cooper represent this in his essay? Why is he talking about a bachelor and a bachelor's thoughts? And very clearly this bachelor, the figure, if you read the entire essay, is not a very masculine, very strong person. No, he's being teased by women, right? And very clearly he's also bothered with the way his thoughts will be received as he's opening up about his experiences with the young ladies, right? So we see very clearly the balance shifting, the balance tilting. Balance of what? The equation between the two genders, right? Let's go to the next quote. He says, and I quote, "I shall be happy therefore if by your means I may be permitted to inform the ladies that as fusty an animal as they think me, it is not impossible, but by a little gentler treatment than I have hitherto met with, I may be humanized into a husband. I shall be mighty well satisfied if she contents herself with contradicting me, that if I happen at any time inadvertently to thwart her inclinations, I shall think myself rightly served if she boxes my ears, spits in my face, or treads upon my corns." Unquote. One last very important quote this one was. He says, these women, the way they treat me is almost like an animal. He says, I urge them that I may be, quote unquote, humanized into a husband. He will be humanized if he becomes a husband. And he says, I am ready to take anything, right? They can contradict me, they can do anything to me, but I am ready to take it. So this is also a very big statement, right? This is by creating such a persona, the Cowper is not only making an observation about a section of society, but most importantly, he's leaving a message for everyone out there that the bachelors also are threatened by women, and they also want to be, quote unquote, humanized into a husband, unquote, right? So in this lecture, we saw from these two excerpts, from the excerpts from these two essays, they helped us understand not only about the 18th century society, the style of writing of William Cowper, but also certain concerns which were significant to the times. Thank you.